It's why, honestly, aside from the fact that I desperately wanted to escape sort of where I was when I was a teenager, I realized the only thing I could do was draw. And if I couldn't do that, there was nothing that I was going to be able to do on the planet. I would end up homeless in a box somewhere.
Yeah, see, the survival instinct for artists is high.
It's high, because that's all we can do. And if we can't do that, then what else is there? One of the things I've also been thinking about a lot for me, and I wonder about people in our business and in entertainment generally, storytellers, is I'm curious, in your head, what makes like a good story? Like, where did you learn what a good story was and what its components were? Was there a particular piece of fiction or a TV show or film where you're like, man, that's it, and then you were able to almost dissect it maybe later in hindsight? What taught you what good story is?
That's a great question. When I was in undergrad, I was taking theater classes. I was reading plays and writing plays and doing that sort of stuff. And some of it clicked. I mean, there were some classes, but the class that actually sat with me the most was the least linear writing that I had. It was really an experimental writing class, and we would do experimental theater and guerrilla theater and do all these weird things in the street, and some of it good and some of it really ill-conceived. But that sort of thing excited me, but it wasn't storytelling per se. That was when I realized I really liked spectacle. Like that, there was a definition for the thing I liked. So I was very drawn to that. And then when I was at NYU and I was being introduced to just the tools in the toolbox and really dissecting what a character is and story structure and that kind of stuff, I think that's when I started to get it. And in connection probably with the Fisher King.
Oh yeah. Yep.
That movie was revolutionary for me. Again, Robin Williams being a little bit sort of my fanboy factor, being like, I used to love him, and as Marc, let me see what it's like when he does something serious. But the first introduction to Terry Gilliam and to see these really flawed characters in a story that had this sort of magical realism element, that I was really attracted to, and Gilliam's directing style is just so visceral. So that I was at school, I think at the time, or maybe I was still in Binghamton when that came out. But that was the one that I think broke it through to me. And then, like the first classic film that I really paid attention to, actually, again, my dad had showed me, it was not Smokey and the Bandit, but was Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And
I've never seen that.
Oh man, that's a hell of a movie. And we were in high school, like it was me and my buddies, and my dad, in a very rare attempt to sort of reach out and connect a little bit, was like, "You want to watch this movie? It's pretty good." Like, okay, yeah, sure. And you sort of sit there and go like, all right, I'm going to watch a black and white movie with my dad. This is going to be a sucky way. At least we're in the air conditioner. Like I could spend the morning in the cool. And again, it was just riveting, and you're sort of sitting there going like, wow, I didn't know this kind of stuff existed. And there's a lot of classics I have not seen, but that really spoke to me because again, it's like not exactly happy ending. Everybody's kind of screwing each other over. Like when you start to step away from the popcorn movies and those sorts of stories, for me, that's when I started getting very excited and discovering like, oh wait, you can have anti-heroes, you can have unhappy endings. I just wasn't really exposed to that kind of stuff. We were a Disney kind of household, and then I'm trying to think. And then as far as reading goes, David Mamet, Red Glengarry, Glenn Ross, and
I guess I'm curious, and then I want to get to character in a sec because that's another thing I'm obsessed with.
Yeah, I know I'm not answering your question. Like, what makes a good story? Like,
or just sort of like because I know a lot of the decisions I've made about what makes a good story, what story I love, or yes, that's my model. I came to that decision sometimes decades after I actually saw the original, or experienced it, because I suddenly had a vocabulary, a language, the facilities to articulate that idea. It wasn't like when I was 7, I saw Star Wars.
Right.
I was like, that's like classic, you know, mythological structure right there. But I was just sort of curious if in hindsight, you were able to identify that movie is sort of what taught me what good story is, or this comic book or comic book arc was, that to me is what a story should be because it hits these particular beats.
Yeah.
And I was just curious if you could identify any of those.
Yeah, for the most part, it were things that struck me in a visceral way. It was definitely not, I was unaware of structure until much later. And now, like you said, in hindsight, I can look back, what's a well-structured film? It's funny, I was sort of out of commission because of my back the other day, and I was watching like the first David Fincher film and the latest David Fincher film, and it's kind of fun to compare them. And I'm looking at them for structure and character and all that kind of stuff. I mean, now I can't watch, but I'm usually a pretty good audience member, and so as a result, I'm not the best diagnostician when I'm looking at a film. Like, I like to be in the audience. I know that a movie is bad if I fall out of it and I start picking it apart. Then I'm like, okay, then I know that there's issues, and I start to see the cracks. So if a movie is, you know, well constructed, or a book is well constructed, you know, I'm along for the ride. That's kind of how I know. But these visceral things, like, and sort of they come from weird places. Like, The Crow's a good example. I don't think The Crow, the comic, is a perfect comic in any way, but it hit me at the right age and the right time in my life, and I was so compelled by it. I just was disturbed and just struck by this character arc and what was going on. And I don't know, it was a book I read every year. You know, like it was one of these things. I had a couple of books I would read every year. And, you know, Watchmen was up there, Dark Knight was up there. Because, I don't know, they made me literally feel, I'd feel the tension, or I'd feel the, you know, the anxiety that was part of the storytelling. So on that side of things, as a audience member and as somebody engaged in the stuff, that's how I used to decide. You know, that's how I would decide what's a good story. Now, for myself, I guess I invert it, and it's, you know, I tell the stories that I have an immediate gut feeling about, and when I don't, I know they're not going to be good. I know that they're going to fall on plot, and not fall down on plot, but they're just going to be plot. Part of my training at NYU, I had these great professors who were real, like, down-to-earth guys, and they said, you know, your job as a writer, you're like a contractor building a house, and you've got to make sure that structure is perfect. But then somebody else is going to come on and put on walls, and somebody else is going to pick the color of the paint. Somebody else is going to put on a roof and decide what that is. And at the end, it may look nothing like what you imagined, but your structure has to be perfect. And not only did it keep me sort of grounded as far as like understanding the role of a writer in, you know, pretty much anything except a novel, but it also, you know, pulls your ego back, pulls the humility back. It gives you a little bit of distance to get to watch stuff. And then it also forces you to say, well, then what, you know, what's going to make it fun? Like, what's going to make it good? I have the toolbox I can always go back to if it's not like, okay, I've just got to tell X type of superhero story or whatever. But when that flash comes, like that gut punch where, like, I don't know what this is yet, but I know it's going to be good. Now I've got something to hang it on, and then I know it's going to be a good story. So for me, those always come, you know, when questions was sort of about themes, and it's as these ideas start to congeal for me. I really don't always know where they are. Sometimes they do start with an image, sometimes they start with a whole concept, but I can tell sort of in my gut, like, oh, this is a story I want to see. If I was in the audience, I would be on that journey. I don't know what's going to happen. Then the faith comes in that you can actually pull it off. Then you worry about that part as you go along. But so I don't know if that answers the what makes a good story question, but
it'll work.